Hello, everyone. This is Tripp, and I'm here with Diana, and
Hey,
we're
everybody.
we're ready to. Oh, we're gonna ruin some lunches, and
I think everybody's lunch is already ruined down here in the United States.
what are you talking about? We got to wake up today saying, "Oh, just what we've all been praying for: the rematch of the century." Oh
Trump versus
yeah.
Biden. Here we go.
Oh, who needs more of that? Like, if you thought one Biden Trump election was all you were going to get in a lifetime, and you have been sitting on your knees talking to Jesus, saying, "Please, please, can we have some more?" Jesus was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, yes, you can. You can have some more. Enjoy."
It makes me think, have you seen the meme going around what used to be Twitter about Donald Trump praying in the church?
And was it shared ironically, mockingly, or seriously, Diana?
It was shared seriously.
So
And it
they
was
found him the one time he prayed at a church?
no, it's one of those paintings, that guy
Oh,
who
they
like
had to put
paints
him in a
those
church. Yeah.
yeah, religious paintings of Trump. Well, this one is Trump in a church and he's on his knees, praying and he's praying like he's a Pentecostal, which is like already a little weird. But so his hands are just sort of open like this and there's this huge fiery lightning bolt coming down from heaven right into Trump's hands and the whole church is on fire. It's like I looked at it and I thought, is this supposed to be good? Is that Trump setting Christianity on fire? He's burning it down. But it was, it's supposed to be the Holy Spirit filling this man with so much passion that it's just like exploding across the universe, beginning in the church, and that the fire of God is landing is right through him. That he's God's instrument.
Oh, well, I'm glad we got that figured out.
Yeah, and so, a lot of people shared it online mockingly, even though it was shared seriously.
Well, um, Jillian here said that apparently he has 6 fingers in that, so we can, it's probably AI. AI is what was required to put Trump in a church praying for the Holy Ghost to revive something. Because the real pictures of his hands this week have all those red spots on it that they got like anti-Trump Republicans discussing what STD he has that has his hands getting red splotched.
Oh.
That's what I learned from the site formerly known as Twitter this week, which my engagement on has gone down dramatically. I find that the individuals that give $8 a month or whatever to find their way into my timeline, to be the ones that previously I muted in a significant way, and it just gets me mad. And
Yeah.
you know what? Since my prayers have been answered, and we get the rematch of the century, who needs to go to X to reflect on it? We're gonna get it nonstop.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on Twitter. I've got almost 70,000 followers on Twitter, and when I used to put things up, I'd get scores of responses and retweets and sometimes, 1,000 likes and just regular basis. And now I put something up and 2 people like it. And so
Yeah.
I know that shadow banning thing is definitely in effect and that Elon Musk apparently truly hates um, people who are progressive Christians who won't pay him $8.99 a month. And so
Well,
it's completely worthless. Pam Chaddock says, "Is it me or is Tripp breaking up?" Tripp, you're gonna
I
have to
don't
watch
feel
your
like I'm
internet.
breaking up with you, but you're no matter what the internet said, Diana, um, we're we're not breaking up. Though, uh, so let's go
Yeah,
to.
we need to talk about the election. Ugh,
I
we're
want to
both
know.
avoiding it. You can feel it.
Yeah, but um, I have this theory. That just in talking to people, my hanging out with independents and um, and Republicans happens in cigar shops where you're smoking cigars in the South, which is one of the places you hang out that is multiracial. It
Huh.
obviously tends towards middle class people across different different races and types of vocations and such. But you're more likely to talk about things and not hate each other because you know that like half your friends hate the fact that you smoke cigars and it irritates them. So you like have this bonding thing that then you'll talk about stuff and and I and I think the generational difference of how people are feeling, if you're millennials and younger about a repeat election is so significantly different that it makes me more worried than some of the older individuals there who are like, well, if it's a rematch, this is like, there's no chance Trump's going to win. Like, who, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know. I got a whole lot of friends and younger people are like, well, I don't want to mess with this. Like, how the generational difference
Right.
of how you see this being framed was significant. Even some of my friends that are Hispanic or Black who can't stand Trump, the kind of frustration they have about Biden for a number of reasons, some foreign policy related, Israel, that kind of stuff, to uh, seeming compromise on economic things and or lack of action places. That the that distinction between there is something uh I wonder how you see it, because the number of people I know who volunteered for Obama and Biden campaigns that are like, I mean, I might go vote for him if I'm in a swing state, but like, well, what's the real point at this point is so much higher if they're younger than me. Think of a bunch of my former youth and such versus same congregation in California or North Carolina I've been a part of. If they're older than me, they're like, no, we have to handle this. We have to, um, and that showed up in a lot of the returns, even from last night, in New Hampshire, when you check generational differences across groups about excitement or turnout or who they voted for, or I heard 7 or 8% this morning writing in ceasefire now. Dean Phillips got 20% of the vote, and MSNBC never had him on. They just never had him on, and
I
that's
think he
their
was on like once in the
and
last week or last couple days.
okay
I did see
in the
him.
last week.
Yeah.
I just know a whole lot of my friends all stopped watching MSNBC when they like just basically equivalently shadow banned uh, Dean Phillips when they're sitting there going like, no, we'll vote for him. Any of these Democrat governors use complete sentences that are clear on foreign policy that aren't going to get tooled by by Israel and forced into things. Someone that's going to do some like direct challenging on X, Y, and Z. Like, we'll take any of them. Give us a moderate Democratic governor from a red state that is aggressive and actually like voices your issues and concerns. That to me, I don't that's my experience from talking to people here and then former students, even just like the older generation and youngers at congregations I was a part of. I like and then I
Right.
saw it in the returns. I'm interested in how you see that.
Well, I mean, I certainly see it too, and my daughter, she tells me all the time. I mean, she'll go vote. She'll vote in the primaries. She understands why, if it is this rematch, why it's necessary to vote for Donald Trump, or excuse me, for Joe Biden against Donald Trump. That's what I'm so afraid everybody's going to do. And so, I mean, she gets it, and she says, yes, she'll do her duty. And the reason she gets it is because we talk about it so much. We have so many serious discussions around our dining room table, about politics, intergenerational ones. And at the same time, she said, Mom, I get this. Don't get mad at me. But everybody I know who's my age is really angry or doesn't care anymore. And so I said, well, y'all are going to have to just figure this out, because there's no way that, I can do the work with people your age to everyone has been in denial that this is going to happen. And now it's going to happen. There are a couple of things that can happen along the way. Um, it could be that Biden has some sort of major health incident. It could be that Trump gets convicted of a major crime and is sentenced to, 10 or 15 or 20 years in jail. And that will go on appeal, but nevertheless, the conviction will be on record. So those two things could happen. In which case, the vice presidential candidate will make a huge difference. We still don't know who Trump will pick. I am convinced that Nikki Haley is still playing for that spot, even though she's doing it in a kind of a counterintuitive way. And then, of course, we have Kamala. And it's very intriguing to watch what's going on that vice presidential level, is to try to see who it is that Trump might elevate to that position, and why. And then also, Kamala Harris has been doing some really interesting work in the last several months. She has been going around mostly to college campuses and college towns, oftentimes in red states, talking primarily about women's issues and abortion. And she is, from what I understand in the media, getting a great response and very large crowds, primarily of younger women. And so I think that one of the things that I'm wondering about is, not only is there going to be a generational divide here, but I'm wondering if there's going to be a gender divide among younger voters. Because the people sitting in your cigar shop, I suspect they are primarily men. And they're not women who would be 22 years old showing up at a Kamala Harris rally in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, because those women know that their rights are on, not only on the line, their rights are already eroded. And so when I hear sort of young Theo bros, rambling on about this, frankly, I just want to say, would you please stop and look around you? Because if you are a man, Black men and Hispanic men, yes, I suspect that most of them will show up at the polls, except for the ones that are deeply sexist and just think that Trump is a kind of a macho dude, and they like that. I suspect that most of them will show up at the polls and vote against the guy who is really hurting their racial and economic interests. And Black men, for example, know that they now have the lowest unemployment rate ever in American history under Joe Biden. And if they don't know it now, they're going to know it in the next couple months. But women, young and old, are furious. All races, it doesn't matter where you live, unless you are a dyed in the wool GOP. Democrats are demons, and I can never vote for one because all Democrats are going to hell. The GOP ticket offers nothing to women except for, frankly, enslavement. And not only are they going to do that, we all know that it's not just going to be abortion, but if there is a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House, they're going to pass a national abortion ban that forever overturns any abortion in the United States at all, period. And not only then will it take a new Supreme Court to get back to the position of women's rights before all this happened, but it will take an entirely new legislative and executive. It will take the entire government to be shifted to simply restore what was already the rights of women before this particular Supreme Court did their work at the behest of the religious right and Christian nationalism. And so, if there is a human being in the United States who is under 40 who does not understand that, Tripp, I invite them to dinner at my house.
Well, could I just say I don't, so I can come to dinner? But you might ruin that dinner, Diana.
No, I would definitely ruin that dinner. But I'm not ruining it for women. And the final thing I just want to say at this point until we move on, with a different part of this discussion about Trump and Biden is, I mean, I will vote for Biden. I will vote for anybody who will stop this from happening. Absolutely anybody, because it's not going to stop with abortion. I have said, and the people I know and trust who have studied this now for 30 years, we all know what's next. Abortion is the first step. Contraception is the second step. That will happen if there is a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House in the next cycle, because that Supreme Court will support that. They will turn back legal contraception in the United States of America. And then, of course, no more gay marriage, because gay marriage is anti-progressive at its heart. And so that's one of the reasons. And not only do they think it's a sin and disgusting and all the sorts of things that they always say about it, but the deep reason why there's such a violent rejection of it is the fact that there are no children that are produced in a same-sex union. And so that anti-procreative piece will become a major motivating factor for getting rid of any kind of marriage equality. They will also turn around the anti-Sodom laws, making sodomy and all forms of homosexuality illegal again. And that is what is at stake. I mean, if people want to sit around a coffee shop or a cigar shop and smoke cigars and crap on that, go ahead, because that's what your wives, your mothers, your daughters, your sisters, every single freaking woman in the United States is facing, that we are going to be relegated within 4 years. If Donald Trump is reelected, we are going to be relegated in the United States to genuine enslavement in the legal system. And that is, I will not stand for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I that issue, the percentage of females at a cigar lounge is significantly smaller, but the one of the other younger regular ones, she's libertarian, and this is why she's not going to vote for Trump or Republicans. She's like, right. I'm a libertarian. I spend most of my time telling them to get their hands off my guns, but you want to know what's more personal than guns? My body.
That's exactly
right. And I think that that side of people that naturally would tend more conservative, that's the issue that is clearly an existential threat once you are observant, that could motivate turnout. I also think if you're a female and talking to younger men, you might want to let them know, because there's certain powers females have over men in their 20s that could animate them for like a little coffee date right after you go vote or whatever you need. You want Netflix and chill? How about we vote and chill?
Wasn't it a group of women in Africa who won a Nobel Peace Prize when they refused their husband's sex until they stopped a war? I'm pretty sure that happened. I mean, I know that happened. I just can't remember the name of the group that actually won the prize in that behalf.
Yeah. True love waits until you reinstate Roe. It's
it's
a new marketing campaign.
Well, I don't know if you know it or not, but the whole reason we have the United Methodist Church and the whole Wesleyan and Methodist movement is because Susanna Wesley and her husband, John's dad, they had a big argument about the Jacobite rebellion in England, which was the appropriate king of England. And when the problem was actually solved, when the Stuart lineage died out and it just became the lineage that was on the throne, there was no more problem. And so anyway, Susanna apparently refused to have relations with her husband until he agreed with her about the Jacobites and the Stuart lineage. And so John Wesley was born 10 months after that whole problem was solved politically. And so it's so obvious that there would be no Methodists if Susanna Wesley had given into her husband's desires and hadn't stood up for her political views.
I know, maybe we can get AI to make that one, right? Like have AI art of some poster being true love waits until
You
your
know,
knees still grow.
I want to mention a comment that's in the comment thread that I think is really important, because this is the comment is why people are not alarmed in the United States. One of the commenters said, "I'm sorry, but I don't see that happening, Diana. Republicans have a very narrow majority at best. If they can win the House and the Senate, they can't even keep their group and their members together in the House." Um, I'm sure this is a very nice and very well-informed person, and it seems to me that that is a very optimistic view of the way that no one before Dobbs was overturned, or before Roe versus Wade was overturned with the Dobbs decision, nobody ever thought that that was going to happen. No one thought that there could possibly be this many right wing Supreme Court justices. No one has ever thought that there would be an out and out Christian nationalist as the Speaker of the House in the United States government, like there is Mike Johnson. Yeah, they can't keep their ducks in a row right now, but if they consolidate power, believe me, their ducks will be in a row in 5 seconds. I understand the way Washington works, and I understand the way the GOP works. And guess what? I also understand the way that this kind of Christian nationalist mentality works. I understand all three of these things, and every single disagreement that they have will absolutely disappear on the morning after complete and total power in the United States. And they will push it as far as they possibly can with every kind of mechanism through the Constitution, through the legal system. They've already told us that they're going to dismantle significant parts of the United States government, and they're already working on dismantling those through the courts, including cases that are currently sitting at the Supreme Court. So, the person who disagree with me, I hope that you'll be disagreeing with me when you're standing and watching me be hauled off to jail for being a big mouth woman once those people are in charge, because this is going to happen. Just like the rematch is happening. I am not being alarmist. I wish that people would have stopped. Over 30 years, people have called me an alarmist. And, I'm really sick of it. And people have called other folks who have predicted every single step of this correctly alarmists. And so anyway, I just no. I love Jesus. I write beautiful things about the Bible. Everybody knows that. I love giving people hope. I love people embracing contemplation and beauty and joy and all of those things, because that's all what it means to be human. And being human also means standing up on a hill and crying out that there is a big freaking wolf on this path, and you're all going to get killed if you go down that way. And
Mhm.
so that's you're going to get both of those things from me. And that's my calling, is to be the whole person that I am. And if that alarms you, I'm truly sorry. There is nothing I can do about that, because I will keep speaking the truth, as I understand it historically, and through the perspective I think that I've developed through
Mhm.
my own experience, politically and theologically.
Yeah. Yeah, the one of the things about the like, even experiencing this, not from afar in another country, but
Right.
here this time, in particular North Carolina, is that as a state, we went and canceled the Democratic primary. So we're not even having one, right? So so some of the experience just in listening to other Democrats in like the local Democratic Party, friends of mine
Yeah.
that serve on school boards and stuff, there's lots of frustration
Right.
because the Biden administration switch the order of primaries to kind of lock him in. Then you have at statewide level, like, we're so scared of what's happening, and those that are in charge that see the kind of threat that you're there, then it's like, well, let's avoid these uncomfortable bits of the nominating process or hearing from people. And like, while I get the logic, it also kind of like the fifth time you say because I say so to your kids, like you realize you're not
Yeah.
a part of the family's decision-making process. It's just because I say so. And you either have to see it how we do and get on board, or like you don't even get a chance to vent your frustrations. And
Right.
so like I get messaged all the time from our party. I told them, like, why can't, like, if I just got to vote for someone other than Biden in the nominating process, I would be like way more interested in helping you. But then you like cut it out, and then James Carville texts me 3 times a day, and I'm just like, one, I think James Carville and Bill Clinton ruined the Democratic Party away from his attention to labor, which Biden has been more attentive to labor than anyone since Clinton has. But I'm sitting there, I'm just like, why? It's that experience. If you're in a state like this, well, the Democrats don't give us a chance to even vote, where everything's being guided because they're scared of losing, and you're in a state that's being gerrymandered all over the place by the Republicans. They override Democratic governor vetoes. More people voted for Democrats to represent them in the state, and they're still got a supermajority of Republicans, right? So at both the party level and at the state level, those kind of things give an institutional legitimacy problem. That is the two-party system, is is how the democracy is functioning and set up now. Is it even working? And I think
Right.
what seems like the strategic move, if you think these system works, right? Like that Biden, a longtime person, have seen it work and been working in government since the 80s, since all these people complaining weren't even around yet, gets experienced by others as, well, what kind of real agency do we have? And it's kind of like our grandparents are telling us, well, you still need you to volunteer, go vote, donate and stuff, but we don't care if, super majority of you think our funding of Israel, if what's going on is kind of wild, or like that we are going to punt regularly on the issues that are important to you, but our compromise things will still
Yeah.
protect big business. If there's not an outlet valve for uh, a perspective, even if it's not the dominant perspective within the party, I think that that brings up animosity. You can see it. Think of the same kind of thing happens in our religious institutions. If we listed off our like 10 favorite under 50 ministers in most of the mainline denominations, if they were started 20 years younger, they would already be leaders in those denominations. But those denominations at the heads are still run by, boomers and older. And they're like sitting there going like, well, let's see who shows up for the vice president role. So I feel like that generational frustration of, when do we get to lead? When does our voice actually shape policy in some specific way that's not already approved on the script boomers and older handed us? That is where part of the angst comes from, is, do I have agency? I don't even have agency to say, I wish it was different, but this is better than the alternative.
Yeah. I think that, Tripp, what you say, I mean, it's so important. And I think one of the things that might surprise s- you know, some of the people you're talking to, is that I feel the same way you do. And I turned 65 this year. And the truth of it is that I was born in 1959. There's only been one president in my lifetime who actually represented the generation that I came from, and that was Barack Obama. And everyone else has been from another world. And, it really is true. It's not just like boomers and above, but it's there is this sort of pod of people that were born in like the mid to late 50s that really were looking toward the 21st century, that were kind of different than the earlier boomers. And some of the earlier boomers are much like the silent generation and that group of people. But I don't want to attribute it generationally. I think that's a disposition towards the future and being able to listen across generational lines. And, I have felt most of my life that I have no agency. Um, even, there was only a very small period of time, in the United States when a white woman born around 1960 was a person that people looked to and said, "Oh, well, there aren't enough. We're not listening enough to those folks." It was maybe 5 years of my entire existence. You know, so not very long. And, and for me to be able to say, "Vote for Biden, get out there, do this," is not an approval. I mean, this is what I think we all sort of are trapped in right now, is that when someone hears me make an argument for voting Democrat this time, it's not a vote of approval for the Democratic Party. I'm a Democrat. I'm sort of proud of being one. I think that Democratic Party's done some pretty interesting things and some bad things, like any institution and organization over the course of my lifetime. But all in all, I think that they're weighted towards the good side. But the truth of it is right now the choices between an authoritarian and dangerous political movement, one that has taken over a political party, so much so that many of the sensible people in that political party are standing on the same hill with me yelling. And some of them are much younger than me. I think of somebody like Sarah Longwell or Tim Miller or Jonathan Van Last, all that really young generation over at the Bulwark. Even David French, who I agree with basically nothing theologically. We find ourselves and we disagree politically on several things too, but we find ourselves on the same hill, pointing to the same danger. So that's the one option. It's not Trump versus Biden. It's dangerous destruction of democracy versus a sadly wounded, incomplete, very flawed political version of democracy that needs to be fixed. And the problem is that apparently people can't do all of those tasks at one time. It would be wonderful if we were human beings and we could get in there and defeat dangerous, dangerous, horrible destruction of democracy and put in a place beautiful utopian kind of better democracy, but we're not going to do that. This is the choice before us. This is the realistic choice before us. Wounded democracy that needs to be fixed and the destruction of democracy.
Yeah.
And that's all I got for you. And I can see it and I recognize the wounds and I know how hard it is. I don't want to vote for some of this. I'm so disappointed by the deep problem, of course, is the fact that in order for the Democratic Party to survive, which Bill Clinton allowed it to do, despite all of his I'm talking about flaws. I mean, think about it. The current Democratic Party we have was really invented by Bill Clinton. And that's why it's so flawed. You know? I mean, it is as flawed as Bill Clinton is himself. And so that means there were some rays of powerful, bright, optimistic hope, the man from Hope. And at the heart of it, there's kind of this wounded father-son relationship where Bill just wanted everybody to love him and basically compromised anything in order to get that love, including wooing corporate America. And so so those are the two parties we got. We got Bill Clinton's Democratic Party for all of its deep, dark, pained reality. And we've got no longer Reaganism.
Yeah, I was about to say, like we mentioned that, before we got started about like how even seeing the New Hampshire primary is one of these moments where you realize that there's been a genuine shift, right? There hasn't been a Republican nomination process where the same person won the first two states in a long time since
Right.
Reagan, right? And so,
Mhm.
and that was the second time, not the first time running. So, like, how would you, like, historically thinking of both like the political shifting identities and the way particular religious expressions connect to it, see the shift away from kind of a Republican Party where like Reagan is the nostalgia?
Yeah, and that's even dying at this point. The what was fascinating last night is when I was watching the returns, I don't know if you saw or not. I think it might have been on MSNBC. That's usually the one we have on for the election returns, despite the fact that Steve Kornacki now drives us insane. Um,
I don't know. We need to get a whiteboard.
we we watch it all the time. Go, just shut up, Steve.
Ever since he was on one of the lists for sexiest man alive, it's just gotten a little more intense.
Yeah, it's gone to his head. So anyway, but th- th- there was I was kind of shuttling around doing some other things while I was listening to the reports, and someone said, "Well, that speech was the final stake in the heart of Reaganism." The Trump's acceptance speech last night, and I've been hearing some people on the who used to be Republicans talk like that for a couple months now, is that there's a slow dawning recognition throughout at least the more thoughtful circles of the Republican, what used to be the Republican Party, that Reaganism is now gone and that it has been replaced by Christian nationalism and the MAGA movement and an authoritarian personality centered, whatever we want to call this, political party. I mean, how is it? I don't even understand how it's
Well,
a
I mean,
political
even
party.
along right with mocking Nikki Haley for thinking about messing with Social Security, right? Like, so underneath these kinds of things that you would think historically get Republican turnout that Nikki Haley was saying,
Right.
kind of like robust national engagement, leading with the military industrial complex, cutting taxes
Yeah.
and
People didn't buy
social
it.
say like all these kinds of things. There just wasn't an energy there. Um, and I wonder, here's something I like I've been thinking about, especially it is if you go into an election and the assumptions you have is that the the ruling elite of sorts, who finance most of it, um, have a consensus around a host of things. We can see it in the blob when it goes to foreign policy. You could have 70-80% of the country thinking one way and it goes one or the other. Or think of the huge consensus on a number of like the expanded checks credit or these kinds of things we even tried coming out of COVID that we can't keep around, or and this kind of thing. If you think that the government, when it goes to economic policies and structural ones, is now, and both parties have a stronger tie to big business than it does to the grassroots of either party,
Yeah.
then what are you doing when you vote? That might be why what is animating people on both sides are culture war things, and and it's not just that those are the most important issues. It's that the populace really knows our agency doesn't have anything to do with how the government's going to respond when it goes to structure. They're going to do just enough structure and support to keep the populace, well, especially if you're younger, debt slaves and dependent on what you little bits you get of a safety net. And then we're going to use infrastructure or luring companies or tax codes to put the burden on the middle class and down, and big business and such are going to get what they want from both parties. And I think, like, if you ask yourself what could we really expect of our desires to be signaled and responded to, it's culture war things. And you all can fight
Right.
about that all you want, why both parties do what their funders need them to do for business stuff. And that
Yeah.
I don't, I've been thinking about that and think that actually helps some things make a little bit more sense, and possibly what a break, how we could break that kind of logjam, like, in what ways would you give agency back to the populace in places where 70%, if majorities of both parties want X, Y, and Z and they don't get it, what's stopping it?
Yeah.
That both of those parties are getting funding from the same companies for this, like the Railway Safety Act. Both presidential candidates support it, and the senators from different parties in the state support it, and it's not going to get to the floor in either one of them. And uh, you get weird comments from Republican senators about why they aren't doing it, and then you stick Mayor Pete out to explain why they aren't going to force a vote. But underneath it, it's like, well, I wonder where the money's going, coming from.
Right. This is where, you asked me about the historical stuff, and uh, you know, there are pieces of what Biden is doing that are very reminiscent of both Roosevelt and the Great Society of Lyndon Johnson. And the problem with that in 2020, 2024 now, is that we have had Reaganism. So to say that Reaganism is gone doesn't mean that it wasn't here for 40 years. And it had a huge impact. And probably the most lasting impact of Reaganism was the abiding sort of poison that government is bad. And so the way in which some of the worst excesses of the capitalist owning of a democracy were always limited was the regulatory state, was the EPA, was the Agriculture Department, was the National Transportation Safety Board. All those all those agencies filled with experts and expertise could apply levers that were legal levers given to them by courts and by Congresses through the years to the excesses of Reaganism and keep it within a particular set of limits. And that's where, since Citizens United when Citizens United went through the Supreme Court during the Bush administration and made corporate power accessible through endless amounts of money, that's what they've really aimed for is the regulatory mechanisms that were holding back. So while Reaganism is in effect sort of dead as a political movement, there's still the quest on the part of people with incredibly large resources to take the one aspect of Reaganism that has most bedeviled them, the regulatory state, and destroy that. So that's still in effect, and that's still happening, and a lot of people don't understand that, and that's another reason why
Well, and
we have to keep voting for Democrats no matter how stupid they are.
And the examples the right uses to undermine the regulatory state tend to be laws that protecting religion or secular or minority or a sexual identity, or something where now we're undercutting regulatory power, but it's tied to an identity politic or culture war issue, as opposed to like what George W. Bush undermined it, but ran. We're trying to liberate businesses so we can have more small businesses and
Correct.
living wage or whatever. And you and I talked about this yesterday, but like last year, I made $6,000 more, and the switch of Trump's tax code cost me. I'm now paying $400 a month more in health insurance, and $500 a month more after Biden in student loan repayment, which is almost $11,000 for making $6,000 more. So like and I was talking with I vented about it on the internet, and I was talking to a former church member who, like, once I was explaining what happened and stuff, and their comment was, no wonder both of this being the option again irritates you, because you know what both parties do when they say when they're running. They're always like, "Oh, we want a strong middle class. Oh, we want entrepreneurs, blah, blah, blah." Well, let's just say you or me and, you jump through the hoops and succeeded in all sorts of ways, but then there's no like the institution that you prepared academically to be in, there's not a place for you and you've moved your family or from, 5,000 miles between two different places trying to get there. And then you start and build a business and blah, blah, blah. And then you're sitting there and you're like, oh, so uh, I'm paying 10,000 some dollars more over the next year because I made $6,000 more last year, and you want me to believe either one of you has my
Right.
interest at heart, right? And I know and and I know a lot of people that don't that situation's way worse than mine, right? Where those stories, let's say they have a chronic health issue in their family, or they aren't naturally uh, uh, a very hyperactive extrovert that finds entrepreneurial challenges and learning new things after you have multiple degrees fun, or like the like they're so like if you're in that situation, it was hard until I had a long conversation with a friend who is 30 years my senior, and she was on church council with me and stuff, and she was like, I had no idea. And I'm like, you should ask some of the other people in my age group, because I know friends that have a much worse situation, and that but like that kind of, I think, gives an example of the situations where you do where this here are your two options does, like, it materially impacts you, where you
Yeah.
go, who really cares?
Right.
And if you were me, there was this year or so after COVID where the government apparently had the ability to do stuff it can't do anymore, and your life is hugely different from it.
Right.
Now, what I would like is that why I, a certain individual from West Virginia is on my when I practice to pray for enemies list. Yeah, but yeah, anyway.
Yeah, and you know what? We obviously we talked about this in private yesterday, but the we are living, and both of our generations are living in the long shadow of that 40 years. So I grew up actually before that 40 years. I had 20 years of my life before that 40 years happened. And I remember what it was like growing up when everybody around me still loved Roosevelt, and for the most part, except for the real far right people. And they were mostly in the John Birch Society and everybody ignored them. Or they voted for Goldwater. And I lived in Arizona, so there were more of them around. But hey, Arizona was never going to have any political power anyway. So, it didn't really matter. So I still remember people who loved Roosevelt. My own grandmother, she'd cry when she talked about him. And of course, the Great Society was all still in effect, basically when I was a child. And so the Reagan shift was a reaction to all of that. And then you get this huge long period of the Reagan reaction, and basically everything that you and I both are suffering from. And we talked about how seniors and people who are baby boomers are suffering from things like Medicare Advantage, and also, how inflationary cycles don't really work with Social Security, and there's so much insecurity around Social Security, and having to pay for the more expensive traditional Medicare, and what that does in terms of your Social Security checks and all of these kinds of things. And also just the sheer worry of many people who are now in their 50s, 60s, and 70s about the stock market, because my parents never worried about stock market. They were never going to own stocks. But the Reagan Revolution forced basic working class and middle class people into the stock market. And that meant that much of our pension funds and other things were privatized, and we lost control of that through these corporate entities making decisions that we can't, we don't have a power to change. They just make them. Um, and so anyway, so there's this impact of Reaganism on both of our generations. And so what the different Democratic administrations since then have tried to do is adjust or minimize the impact of Reagan. And effectively, I think the Clinton construction of the Democratic Party was a way to adjust to Reaganism. And I think that Clinton gave away too much. I think that Hillary Clinton knows her husband gave away too much. And I think that had she won president, I think she would have spent most of her presidency trying to correct the mistakes her husband made some 20 years earlier. That's just my theory of the case. It's
Well,
an
she was
interest.
vocally critical
She
of his
was.
trade policy during the
Yeah.
election, but you wouldn't have noticed it because the other option was Bernie Sanders, who was just been like,
Really
I was.
critical.
Well, you're critical of it a little bit. I just want you to know I was against it the whole time. He's like, no one.
Right.
I always told y'all NAFTA was a gift to the rich and an attack on the working class.
And she goes, well, you're really kind of mostly right,
she's like,
Bernie.
you're mostly right, but I'm gonna win. And Matt, yeah,
So I
and
think
she
that,
was still attached to the military industrial complex in all sorts of ways that I think
and she's
meant that
still
younger
attached to
people.
her husband, oddly enough.
Yeah, that does happen.
Yeah. But so I think that would have been, I mean, that's an interesting plot for a movie that we'll never have, and so I think that would have been the case. But certainly Obama was then an attempt to do not just an adaptation of Reaganism, but a real reset of it. And it was really hard for him because of being Black. And that just brought up this racial animus that had been all through the whole system all along, but people tended to sort of pretend it wasn't there after Martin Luther King. And so it really inhibited Obama. And I've always kind of wondered if we didn't elect them in the wrong order. And maybe we should have elected Hillary first. And that Hillary could have corrected some of the mistakes her husband made, cleared that board, and then you could have had a figure like Obama come in and actually do a major reset of the whole thing. Because the Obama reset, it worked a little, but the other stuff inhibited it. It's between the racial anger and hostility that was present in the culture and was always taking Obama down, both behind the scenes and in public, and the Iraq War, and his own failure to be able to manage the worst excesses of that. And so then Hillary comes along. She's trying to fix the whole problem, and of course, then she gets defeated. Then Biden gets in, and I think that what Biden is actually trying to do is the reset that Obama wanted to do. And so now, Biden is picking up. I can't imagine that those aren't conversations that they had about Roosevelt and the Great Society. I mean, I cannot imagine that some of Biden's ideas weren't kicked around the Oval Office between the two of them, late nights, saying this is, in our dreams. And I think that Biden really, in his heart of hearts, wants to reset the whole thing. I think that Biden wants the kind of Roosevelt 2.0 or Great Society 2.0. But there's been 40 years of Reaganism and 400 years of deep racism and the profound sadness and flaws that Bill Clinton displayed about misogyny and women. And all of that stew is over here. And all of that is impacting where you and I struggle with paying bills, having hope for the future, and wanting to vote for somebody who's really going to take us to the places we feel like we need to go. And we just got to somehow do our best to fix the mess. And that makes me really sad. I wish it was more than that. You might get more than that. I'm not going to get more than that. I got another 20, 25 years left in this place. And fixing it's going to take that long. But by the time you're my age, it could all be different. And you guys can really take it to where it needs to go. But it's just going to take time because this is a big, multi-generational, 100-year mess. And we've come very close to fixing it on several occasions. But we've never quite gotten there because I think that moneyed interests and real powered interests have always figured out a way to stop the genuine will of the people and real equality. And that is just worth fighting for in my book, even
And I
when I'm
think
hurting.
there's this bit when you think of the next 20 years, there are a number of variables the nation state has very little power over
Yeah, that's
that are
right.
going to shape it. I mean, right
Climate
now,
change
climate
is one of
change,
them.
the impact of AI on the market and labor is going to be huge. You won't be able not to use it and adapt because you'll get outdone competitively by peers in your economy, especially when, our laws are, if you're a publicly traded company, it's the shareholders that you have the primary allegiance to, not the workers or the communities that are impacted by it. And then like the like we can see even a growing way where terrorist disruptions to the global economy, the way we've integrated right across just-in-time shipping, production lines, and stuff, have a
Right.
huge impact. And all these shifts are there. At the same time, the the seven
The
countries,
technological security stake too,
yeah,
which we don't
and the
have a
G7
right.
now is, in the next year or so, is gonna get passed by the total GDP of China and its allies economically. And if you look what happened when we did the same, America and our allies get the largest economy for a long time, the others had to figure out how to adapt, and that economic, stuff drives allies and such, and control of culture in all sorts of ways that so our two political parties and the way we argue and fight in America have assumed the last 80, 90 years a kind of global center of America and our place in the market and military and stuff that is in the process of changing. That who knows what happens when
Mhm.
there's either mass unemployment because of technological use, or global wealth being filtered here changes, or it impacts other countries and migration coming here goes up. The even though you're kind of like post like figuring out how to be, like post Reagan and the way that framed, the external factors that aren't even about our country are
Mm-mm.
going to force a realignment. And I think one of the things that we are mutually worried about is when like our worst angels are controlling the knobs of sorts, especially of our military. Like there in and you mentioned this before, but there are a couple things that all whack, kind of like connect to this. Uh, Charlie Kirk and all the talking points people, big attack on MLK and his legacy, right? At
Yeah.
MLK Day this year.
Yep.
Not that we have to go into it, but it's just kind of nuts and crazy, and ugly. And that's mainstreaming what has been, as a Southerner, the what your racist uncles always said about MLK.
Right.
Um, and like taking that, like the one holiday that the uh, Black Baptist socialist anti-war preacher gets in our country. It's like the best day to be Baptist in the of all of America. And then and you take that all the way down to like the Project 2025, when that are we going to admit what their plans are? They published it, right? And here's how we're going to do it. And a large part of it is having people that are down to undo, right, the functioning of government and the administrative state and all this kind of stuff. And like when you think of that part here compared to what people in the chat even brought up, what happened in Germany and
Yeah,
such.
we have that in our notes to talk about
I know,
Germany
and,
too.
and and I hadn't thought about it till we were talking, that like that response to MLK and publishing Project 2025, and we're not talking about it. That's real. That's like letting the cat out of the bag, kind of like the reporting in Germany, but they got a different response.
Yeah, the what's happened in Germany over the last month has been really interesting. There's a political party that's much like our MAGA Christian Nationalism Party, parties or groupings, um, in Germany as well, and it's under the guise of the ADF party, Advance for Deutschland or something like that. Uh, I- it's ADF, And the ADF has been marginalized by the mainstream political parties in Germany because they're still, rightly so, hyper allergic to anything that resembles Nazism in Germany. And I think that certain forms of Nazi political organizing are still illegal in Germany.
Well, see, they actually teach you the
Alternative for Deutschland. There it is.
yeah, they actually teach people lessons they need to learn, right,
From
from
yes,
their history. Like, you can't go doing anti-Semitic
right.
anything, even though the country itself is supporting a critique of Israel's policies. Like, they are able to make the distinction, right, and go, "No anti-Semitic BS. We can't
Right.
have an organizing party about this because we learned from our history." And in America, we change our history books and take over school boards so that, what
Your
used to
kids
be
don't
called
have to learn that granddaddy was a slaveholder.
yeah, what chattel slavery was just a unique, really inventive form of Anglo, on-the-job training, you
That's
know?
right.
Like
Where in Germany, they just come out and say, "Your grandfather was a prison guard at a camp where Jews were massacred by our own people, and let's not do that again." That's German school system.
it is a different way of dealing with the ugliness in your past.
But it is worth saying that despite that school system and the completely strong, honest engagement with German history, these political parties, these groupings that are now under the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland banner, um, they have reemerged and they are clustering together. And so the reporting in last month is that a kind of a investigative German news organization, Connective, uh, got access to a meeting that was held between all these groups. And the groups included outright Nazi groups, AfD membership, people who are members of the German parliament, corporate people. I mean, it was a big range of folks. They met at a resort and they unrolled their plan. Like the American 2025 plan, what's gonna happen when Trump is reelected. This is their plan, for what they want to do when they have enough political power and potentially, higher office, in Germany. And the plan is structured mostly around immigration and getting rid of immigrants, including people who have the wrong skin color and the wrong last names, whose grandparents may have come to Germany, say from Turkey or or from Africa. And they want to actually get rid of people who were born in Germany and people who hold German passports who aren't Anglo-Saxon, who aren't German, ethnicity. And so anyhow, it was shocking and how they were planning the takeover and where the money was coming from and all the stuff is a very detailed report. I put it in my newsletter today when I sent out the link to everybody. And the plan, not all the response pieces. There was a good story about the response in the Washington Post yesterday. And, what happened was once the story became public about 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now, um, people got really upset in Germany because this political party, the AfD, right now is polling at around 25% approval, in the German elections, which is huge because Germans have a multi-party system. And so if you get a quarter of the electorate on your side, you're gonna be able to control an enormous amount of political power in a parliamentary and not just two-party system. And so they're particularly poised to win areas of Germany that was where Adolf Hitler came from in southern Germany, including the area of Germany where my ancestors came from in Saxony. And I can tell you my grandfather still sounded like a Nazi when I was a little girl in the 1960s. He always thought and his father was from Saxony. And so anyway, millions of people this last weekend poured out into the streets of major German cities protesting the AfD and demanding that the German parliament politically restrain all of these parties, and accused them all this Nazi anti-immigration stuff as being un-German and undemocratic. And the plan itself revolves around what they're not calling it anti-immigration. What the plan is now called in this world of right-wing politics is demigration. So we're going to demigrate.
It's like self-deportation.
Yes, it's kind of like that, or kind of like demigrating Jews by putting them in their own section of the city until they can be, moved somewhere else. And so anyway, it's that. And so it's very blatant. It's in black and white, and people are, unlike here in the United States, when you hear Stephen Miller talk, you kind of go, oh, that's just Stephen Miller, or oh, I'm so tired of Trump, or oh, 2025, this is never going to happen because, our system will prevent it. Whatever our cynical, tired take is about Donald Trump, see, this is the piece you were just talking about. It's not just Donald Trump. There are global movements of which Donald Trump is one part that are like this. And so this is one of the responses to all of those global crises, is in these tired, democratic, wounded, incompletely equal, corporately corrupted places like most of us Westerners inhabit. There are people who want a different future than we want. And they are organized, and they have money, and they have plans, and they are putting those plans into action all around us all the time. And the Germans, unlike us, are protesting in the streets. And meanwhile, we shake our heads and say, oh, I don't know, maybe I won't vote.
Yeah. Do you
I'm
one of the things that
so worried, Tripp. You have no idea. I stay up nights thinking about this.
So when I was on faculty at the University of Edinburgh, one of my best friends during lockdown, Ulrich Schmiedel, has written a number of books on European right-wing religion and authoritarianism, and has done quite a bit of research on it. And one of the things that came up in our conversation that this actually made me think of is, because they have a whole parliamentary system and it's a multi-party thing, then when, let's say, the 80% of the country that thinks this is horrible, right? They all show up at the protests and they all agree on that. And when they go to vote, they're actually going to vote for someone that they have a much deeper connection with ideologically,
because they have more choices.
Right. And then that part, their representation, they vote for someone they're passionate about. And then those parties compromise and get the compromise candidate and blah, blah, blah. And like when even the primaries removed, and you can't really go vote for JFK Jr. or Cornel West or whatever.
Or it's Robert. No, JFK is at the bottom of the ocean. I'm sorry to say.
I think we take any of the Kennedys other than the one we get to vote for right now.
I take Maria Shriver. She's really kind of interesting.
But that right, like if you show up and there's 3 or 4 different parties representative, but they're all like, no, we don't want the resurgence of the Nazis. And then you go vote for your people, and say the 20 or 30% of the Democratic Party that are much more like AOC, Bernie style get to actually be themselves and be that voice that then compromises like Bernie has, to the chagrin of a number of his longtime fans, to have a president that's not like the crazies, right? You could see a situation where David French and the Bulwark people and AOC and that crowd and their constituencies who now feel represented and voted for compromise on Biden 10 years younger. And you're like, yeah, we could do this. and
Right.
it would be the moderate red state Democrat who's been reelected twice. And you're like, this is the best we can do. But you know what? You know why I like these people? Now that I've got to say everything I say, is they aren't Nazis. And you're like, we're heard. And then the next 2 years later, you want more of your people in the House because you'll get a little more power or seating on committees, and you can put all your energy into like feeling represented. But when we got the two-party system, even though we're in these shifts of the parties, there's a whole chunk of the Republican Party that feels completely ignored and stuff, and then there's a whole chunk of the Democrats that are like, what in the world? And I think that I wonder what part of that issue keeps it's part of suppressing organizing energy and investment in democracy that you don't have when there's a whole bunch of
Yeah.
parties. Like in Scotland, it was that way. The Socialist Party in Scotland's huge, and they are out in front of every time I walk to school, you would see them talking, and and they're like there's a whole nother set of parties that could identify anyway, but also want Scottish independence, and but they all end up compromising and working together in ways that are different than here. Um, and that when Ulrich and I were talking about it, he said that when you get this rise of like kind of right-wing religion in Europe, it usually gets crystallized in a party, and there is a public discourse that names all the angst and things, and dog whistles and stuff, and then there's the off the record part that rallies people around, and then there's a whole group that doesn't know whether or not this party that they might resonate with the problems that don't want to be crazy, like are they going to vote for them or not. And something like this, right, to have the reporting come out, they go, whoa, well, what's the other option that's kind of more conservative culturally in X, Y, and Z that isn't Islamophobic, re-immigration, nut jobs. But protest 2020 or the project 2025 comes out, and Charlie Kirk runs around trying to kill MLK Day, and uh, then all of a sudden David French is supposed to be working with AOC, and they're like, whoa, are you
Yeah.
ready for the rematch of the century? Or
Yeah, and that's the problem with I mean, the problem you're laying out there is ideally, the primary system is supposed to be kind of the multi-party thing, and then you come into the November generals, and you're unified. That's the theory behind it, but our politics, have become kill your opponent. I mean, it's not just disagree with your opponent or offer a different view or give your voters a chance to express their opinions. It's really just like a politics of destruction. And so primaries themselves, and this is why the Democrats have canceled those primaries, is like, I don't think that they're trying to be autocrats. I don't think they're trying to become what they're trying to defeat. That I don't think that's what the intention is. I think that they recognize that the primary system has become so destructive that it actually hurts good candidates in the long run. And that people work to destroy the reputations of other people who are technically in their same party just so that those folks will get the nomination. So the primaries have become remarkably like the general. When the general went really negative, you're trying to just wipe your opponent off the face of the map. Now the primaries have become that. And
and that
that's
party primary stuff, they kind of exist in their own conversation bubbles, right? Because you don't have
right.
kind of one big news story, one big network or whatever. Like the tribalization of content awareness news makes primaries function like the election for your tribe.
Yeah, really. And you can think about how local elections have become brutal, in so many different circumstances. And so there's this real, the war imagery for political life has, just been embodied in the practice of elections. So I think that, what's going on there is by ramping back the possibility of destructive primaries, you're protecting your strongest candidates. At least that's probably what they're thinking. I mean, I'm not sure it works that way, but I think that's what is going on. So
If you know that if you're more than likely end up with Joe Biden, does anyone think it would help him to actually have to debate? Right? Like if I understand their decision making, I just don't feel represented by him. There's
right, I
nothing
agree with
about
you.
him like going into a debate right now. And if you can hold it off till he goes to one debate with Trump, if they both will debate,
There will not be a debate
and
if it's the 2 of
if it's
them.
standing up against someone that can't differentiate Nikki Haley and uh, from from the head of the House of Representatives and Nancy Pelosi, then I'm not too worried, right? If those two are being live streamed, that Biden a stutter and go back in time for a few minutes, and like you'll at least know what he plans to do. And when you look at the people that actually are in his cabinet and running things, you're like, they all use complete sentences and seem competent. And then when you think about
The
that guy,
cabinet of Trump?
yeah. Like he's like, I'm coming back being vindictive, and this
Yeah.
time I'm not going to get ran over by those Republicans that like the Constitution.
You kn
And
can
I'm
we
only going to be an autocrat for the first day. Giggle, giggle.
Yeah, really, cross my fingers, ha, ha, ha. Can we go back to that just for a second theologically?
Yeah.
Because I think that, we've been talking about these stark contrasts politically, and, both you and I care, and we really do read about this stuff, and we have, you know, friends who are genuine experts in all of this, and I really am a historian, American historian. So I mean, I just know a lot of the run up to where we are now. So we have that level of expertise. But what was really striking to me in what you just said is the other thing that both of us really care about and are trained in, and that is theology. Because the deepest contrast here for me and for my heart is the fact that each one of these possibilities is modeling a particular vision of God. And when you say that thing, Trump and the vengeance piece, that's Trump's idea of God is divine vengeance upon one's enemies. And this is why evangelicals love him. He could be sleeping with anybody. He could be a rapist 20 times over. Oh, guess what? He probably was. But he could do anything. But he's going to be the bringer of God's vengeance and God's justice. And what they view justice as retributive, not restorative. And Biden, on the other hand, his God is really sweet. In effect, Biden's God is a really nice old grandfather sitting on a throne in heaven who's inviting all kinds of people to come in and have bread and wine and just really enjoy one another's company. I mean, he is a kind of really just nice mid-century Roman Catholic, let's all get along. I love everybody God. And so there's nothing about vengeance. There's nothing about Biden's God that would ever hurt anyone. As a matter of fact, that God only wants to help people. That God
And the
cares
God might have been in heaven too long and not be fully aware the experience of the underside. And
right.
on the
That's true.
occasion that they get close enough to understand it, they have genuine sympathy because they've
Right.
had experiences of pain and can recognize it. But that God's also like been running a large heaven industrial
Right.
complex for a long time,
So he
and the
forgets.
distance from the ground, forgets how it works. And you're just like, maybe you need a more incarnational deity, and that's why if you could just update it, talk to Papa Francis a little more, get in the current century's uh, Catholic theology. Um, you know,
I just
eh,
want like Jim Martin can show up at the White
yeah,
House
just
and give him a little
help
lesson.
the brother out. Help the brother. Maybe need some AI art. But instead of like Trump catching on fire in a church, it's Francis just give him a little paddle. And Frank's like, we stopped paddling. But Joe's like, that's how I remember it. I was in Catholic school before you were born, Papa Francis. You got to spank me. That's how I learned, just like the nuns did.
Well, yeah, so you get the point.
No, I think it, yeah.
Yeah, and so what we're looking at here is not just politics. We're looking at two men who have a particular theopolitics. And you cannot separate them. You know, the Biden's sort of vaguely distant and really nice God, you know, is definitely kind of a theopolitics, but it's not mean. You know, it's a God who welcomes everybody. It's a God who wants the world to be a better place, you know?
Yeah, even if you like, the consequences of them are problematic in different ways, but there's only one of them you think their intentions are actually really, like, they intend good for everyone, right? Like
Correct.
that's a like I think Biden intends good. I just think he's wrong about certain things, and maybe I'd prefer, maybe I'd prefer the of feisty Jewish materialist God, like of the you know, like if Bernie was in charge, better. But if you're just picking, like, I feel like, you know, Bernie's advice, like, look, I'm not president. Elizabeth Warren, she's not president. So like, if you're just trying to pick, if you have to have one, do you want one of them that when they find out that one option is before the foundations of the earth, electing large percentages of people that bear your image to have eternal conscious torment to demonstrate how holy and loving you are, only one of them gets jazzed about it.
Right.
And that's like Trump. He's like going in like, so I'm going to go in, I'm your retribution. I'm really pissed. And I just want you to know, like, double predestination, what, we have to wait a while for that. And we don't know how that works out because we haven't even got to the eschaton yet. I'm just thinking, I would like to let you know who the reprobate are and give you a date. Maybe the first day I'm in charge,
Right.
where
I'm just going to take over.
Where we can go ahead and start working out our salvation on the populace.
Yeah, and that's what the appeal is. I mean, I've gotten at least 3 emails this week from really upset people. You know, I often get them upset people who say that I'm too awful about Trump.
Look,
I just
sometimes they
protect
send their emails to you for
or
you to me.
you. So you can tell me to shut up, which I love that one.
I'm like, this is dangerous. Like, could you think of worse life advice? If I took it, I like, Diana, I got an email today. I'm supposed to inform you.
Y'all, this really happened.
Oh, actually, I know, but
this really happened.
Before I would finish it, there's a high likelihood Richard would intervene. He's like, Tripp, don't do it. Don't. I know. I get those emails too. I'll just tell you, bad idea to use the internet's wisdom, probably from a more elderly white man with means, to tell Diana free life advice on behalf of their account of the Holy Ghost. That seems like a bad idea. My experience, unsolicited life advice from Trump stands, including theological edification, is not a good beginning of a conversation with most powerful females.
No. But so we get those emails, which
they're
special. But I've gotten some really good emails from incredibly wonderful people who like us and who also love the Cottage, and they're really worried and they're scared. And the 3 of them this week in particular said, "I don't understand. I just don't understand how Christians can support Trump." Well, this is the reason, is that at this deep level, there are these archetypes, these archetypal images, theological images of God that drive people's social, ethical, and political choices. And, you know, it's funny because I think about this a lot, and I don't think I've completely solved it. Trump was very influenced by Norman Vincent Peale, which arguably is the most liberal rendering of Reformed theology in the 20th century. It completely mutes any kind of justice of God, and replaced it all with positive thinking, and that injustice was the fault of our own misapprehension of the world, and that as soon as we changed the way we saw the world, then evil and injustice and failure and all those things would resolve themselves. But Peel, I think that is a kind of the real twisted sort of heretical version of liberal Protestantism of the mid-20th century. So that's what Trump grew up with. And that's what people often talk about, his business sense and, the sort of like we can, optimistic sort of future. But I've never really, I mean, he talks about Peel, but I've never really seen him demonstrate that kind of liberal Presbyterian God ever, in his speeches or off the cuff remarks about God or about faith. I mean, the way that it demonstrates itself is always through this idea of I'm the best and everyone else is my enemy, a real deep paranoia, and this very ugly, vengeful, um, divine figure. And so anyway, just for me, it's a theological puzzle as to where he got this violent, really violent, rendering of God.
Yeah. So, I I
Oh,
I
someone
keep
says
a
Roy Cohn. That's an
yeah, Roy
interesting
Cohn.
suggestion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I keep my my like notes when random things happen or I'm reading something, I put in it and I'm like, I'll use this at some point. And 4 years ago, we were in Scotland, and this is leading up to the election and stuff. And Elgin, this point 12, this is what I wrote down in my notes. Happened 4 years ago. Dad, are actual Christians voting for Trump? And I responded and said, how are you using the word actual? And he said, you know what I mean. And I just said, ditto, son. And I think that like gets at something, like when thinking back to it, that seemed transparent to him. Like, that was really the first election where he was thinking, and listening. And plus, if you're in another country, they follow American politics closer than most Americans do. And it's
Mhm.
covered in a, like, this is what's going to impact our life the most is what these people do. Um, that was right around the time he had made his public confession of faith as a Baptist and been baptized. And when he was picking his verse, for baptism, he picked the Philippians 2 hymn, which, for someone
Oh,
that loves that passage and such, I was like, oh, this is great. And so, that's what triggered it, right? Was you're sitting there going like that contrast of where is this in there anywhere? And, and to think that we've spent the last 4 years kind of where for a portion of the American church, it's been boiling and simmering, and now more and more has, boiled off. And the concentration of that ugly kind of Christo-fascist authoritarian heart is just sitting there. And so, and I know plenty of people that's a good reason, especially in their experiences, that they've left the church and aren't sure about it. But for those of us that's not on the table, or something we can really imagine, uh, that's like a real reason to care about what the public face is and what you give voice to in your
yeah.
own way and what you support and stuff. And like, yeah, would I like Biden's the way the theopolitical imagination to be different and such? Yeah. Is that a much better starting point for figuring out what it's like to take the mind of Jesus seriously, who doesn't count equality with God something to be grasped, but humbled himself? Like, there's
Mhm.
just there's like a different starting point. And, um, and, and while I think the ongoing frustration and stuff can really be overwhelming and make those who've had a lifelong connection to Jesus and the church want to walk away. I also think, no, like what's going to be embodied in the body politic does dictate possibilities for tons of life. And figuring out how to be invested in the most beautiful way you can in this particular moment, either on the local, the macro level, and everything in between, so that there's more possibilities for something more beautiful in the future. That to me is what kind of energizes me to wade through the yuck and the muck to go, well, you live once, you didn't pick where you found yourself, and you got handed a tradition, be it democracy or the church. And like all traditions, they aren't done and they aren't all good. But you either say democracy or Christianity is so over with, I'm throwing them out. And now what are you going to work with, think with? What symbols are you going to use in stories and such? Or you go, no, well, it isn't finished. And since it isn't all good, what do you do with this generation? There's that psalm, and I wish I remembered it, because I read the other night with the kids. The two littles will read different psalms out of this children's psalm book, and they pick which ones kind of their feelings for the day. And one of them is one of the psalms with the Shema in it. But the opening lines are something like, every generation, parents and grandparents tell their kids and their grandkids how God's been faithful. And then it's your turn to add to the story. And that's why I say, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one, right? And it's this, and some of those generations were in exile. Some of them had a king that had new possibilities to it, like Josiah. Others had Jeremiah show up at the court, and the king says, can we get a new prophet? Because I don't want to listen. Others, like, you just think of the whole history of Israel. Like, if there was going to be a time in the history of Israel where the theopolitics was so bad and ugly, you're just like, I'm out, then it's already happened. And the same's true in church history. We could pick places where if it was so ugly, so unfaithful, so vile, that you need a point in time to go, that's too far for me, I'm out. It's already happened.
That's
And
correct.
so there's something about like going, well, since I'm here at this time, in this place, in this context, in these relationships, and I'm part of these traditions, how do I receive them and how do I hand them on? And that is something you actually have agency over.
And that's the question that I have been working with my entire career as a teacher and writer. I don't know if you wouldn't have any way of knowing this, but when I taught the beginning of my career at the Evangelical College out in California, I taught a history of Christianity survey, all 2,000 years in 13 weeks. Most challenging thing I ever did in my life. You can do anything, actually, if you can do that. And at the end of that class, I did exactly what you just said about about that. I said I would stand up in front of the class and I'd say, well, now you have studied church history. And I, sort of talk a little bit about some of the highlights along the way. I said, and guess what? It's your turn. Go and make it. And I can remember the first time that I ever did that. And there were about, 45, 50 young adults in the class, two of them who are major theologians in the United States right now. And and people were crying because it was so empowering to think that they were part of a story. And for that's see, I don't feel powerless. I mean, I know that there's levels at which I have not much power. But that's when I'm trying to invest my power in the wrong place. In some ways, it's very Niebuhrian, give me the wisdom to know what I can change and the thing and what I can't change, and the wisdom, and then to be able to know the difference. Because if we try to change that which we can't change, then we go crazy. Then we lose our whole souls, become addicts, become whatever it is. The anger just absorbs us in ways that are completely toxic and unhealthy. But if we can figure out the difference, is that where can I be myself fully and make the changes that are within the scope of the work that God has called me to do. That's what gets me through. And so I think that what you're saying is just an incredibly sensible thing, and is the way congregations and communities of faith and families where this matters should be talking about all of this. There are certain things we're not going to be able to change. Richard is constantly telling me we're not going to actually be able to change the outcome of this election. Something is going to happen, and it might be something we happen to like, and it might be something we happen to hate, or might be something we're indifferent about. We can't get in there and make our will, enforce our will over the whole thing. But there are pieces along the way that we have responsibility for, and that we can certainly give ourselves to try to press that outcome in directions that we think are more life-giving and more in line with what we understand to be our theopolitics.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, it has been.
It's been fun.
As we close up, I just want to underscore the fact that I think we wrote a really interesting article here. Because the whole time you were talking about sort of Biden stuff and all the theopolitics in the end, I was really thinking about everything you were saying. And in effect, I think that Biden brought this sort of father knows best Roman Catholicism from like all those 1940s and 50s movies, that we see at Christmas time. That kind of Catholicism, that's the kind of Catholicism that really shaped him. The good Catholic priest who, saves the town, or, opens the boys ranch, or, whatever. Angels, show up in his study, that kind of Catholic priest. The really nice fathers knows best Catholic priest. But that for Biden became, in his young adulthood, crystallized through Vatican II. And so what you see is kind of a mid-century warmth of the church and the fatherly patriarch piece of the church that was considered to be life-giving, warm, loving, run through the theology of Vatican II, where you have not a this versus that, Catholics versus the world mentality, but instead the switch is towards a Catholicism that stands at the heart of the world and that radiates out and creates a circle of light, creates a big table in which all humankind can sit. And I think that those two images of God and those two theological visions, the Father knows best Catholicism and the radiating light of Vatican II Catholicism, and its emphasis on justice and inclusion, that really becomes Biden's theological stew, out of which he's dealing with moral, ethical questions and trying to figure out his political vocation. And Trump, I think that when you were talking, I kind of realized something, is that the absolute inverse of the Reformed heresy of positive thinking is the Reformed heresy of an evil God. It's the inverse Reformed heresy, is the God that we've been describing. And so it's almost like Trump went from the happy Norman Vincent Peale God, and you can maybe even see it in Trump. You listen to older interviews with Trump. I never think he's been a nice person or an appealing person, but he was a bit more Pealian early on in the optimistic, business you can succeed sense. And when that kind of goes off the rails, what are you left with? I think you wind up in the other Reformed heresy. It's the opposite one, where everything is dark, and what's stopping you from having this successful life? What's clearly the enemies are surrounding you. It's clearly the fact that the non-elect have somehow seized power. It's the God who is ready to rise up to protect those who have been trying to follow him, who have been trying to find success, and yet have been somehow inhibited by evil. And so it's the God who will destroy all that evil. And so maybe that's Trump's weirdly, theological story is moving along these two poles of these American Reformed heresies, from the optimistic one to the most deeply violent and pessimistic one. And to have those two things side by side, the Catholic Vatican II, Father Knows Best kind of mid-century rendering of 20th century theology, and then this kind of Presbyterian extremist heresy or Reformed extremist heresy continuum is really, I mean, like I said, I think we wrote an article.
And that's why many of you are members of the Cottage. Diana's Substack.
I always play with stuff like this, and then I write one article. People say, "Oh, that'd be a great book," and then my agent jumps on email, says, "Oh, that'd be a great book," and I say, "Well, how many great books have I written this year? 15, 20 of them."
Yeah.
But no, that's to me that I'm thinking, and that's helping me understand maybe a little bit more clearly.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it, and this has been.
Well, you're my co-author.
Yeah. My favorite is when you get your name on something you didn't have to actually type it. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
when I speak a book, I'm really that's the best.
But thank you all for that have joined live. Those of you that listen later, thank you all you who are contributing members at the Cottage and the Homebrewed Community. We appreciate it tons. And those of you that are members of both, oh well, that's the real elect. We're here to celebrate. They
are the friends
double election.
of God.
You know,
double election.
Well, but we're getting close to Diana's big birthday, so we're gonna have to have some fun in February.
Oh, thanks.
And but we'll have to. Well, I'm sure we'll end up doing this more frequently over the next year. And if you're really, really, really insistent on that, and have access to a way to bribe us to just do it regularly, you should, because I occasionally mention that people, there's bound to be somebody, Charlie Kirk and all that. He got $20 million last year to proselytize for crazy right-wing religion.
Isn't that astonishing?
And I can ruin a lunch every week for like way less than that, Diana. This is what I'm saying. Like way less. But it's always good to do this, and we'll do it again. And remember, those of you that have been on here, feel free to let your friends know. I always get emails, Diana does, after these, where people are just glad that, there's a community of people that share their values in a faith way and are trying to figure it out in a time where who knows exactly what's up and up.
Yeah. And I love that too, because it actually encourages me when we get those notes. People say they don't feel as alone because of our crazy ramblings. And the truth of it is that you and I, we care about a lot of the same stuff. And I mean, we really do. And we're just trying to make our way through this the best we can. First, I think we did it because we were so worried about the last election. And now we're just here we are again, Tripp.
Yeah.
Oh, it was such a good show that we've just had to do it for 4 entire years.
Well, yeah. I'd love to change the title because we don't have to, there's less angst to be shared.
Well, we always get to a place where we're a little less angsty, and I think we're just gonna need that. Look I can't even talk right now. I sound like Joe Biden.
Yeah. Hey, but those of you that did stay on to the end, in the next week or so, we'll announce dates for Theology Beer Camp.
Oh yeah.
And Diana and Brian are both coming this year, but we're not even going to announce that yet. So y'all can know that. I think it's going to be, I'm like 99% sure, Homebrewed and Cottage peeps. It'll be October 17th to 19th. Like, just saying, it'd be great to all hang out. And
Somewhere out west, I think.
yeah, but it's all secrets. Well, it's more in like the middle part, and there's a major airport right there. And it'd be 3 or so weeks before the election. So are you saying, Tripp, if you and Diana are together at Theology Beer Camp, that there should be a late night drinking game bingo version of ruining post dinner? Yeah, there should. There should. Like, will it likely happen? Probably.
Probably.
And last time Diana was like, well, I can't do that if I, with beer and stuff. I brought gin. We can even we can have gin and tonics. That makes it more palatable.
For the Anglicans in the crowd.
I know. Like they like it, and and if one of those Anglicans that doesn't know what to do wants to just sponsor ruining dinner throughout the election season, I'll make whatever mixed drink they want. That's right.
Tripp will be your bartender.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And I know what that means if you're talking to Episcopalians and you're like, oh well, let me you have to get requests because they don't go to the liquor store like a Baptist does, where you go, what's on sale that mixes with diet soda. That's not how it works.
No.
And I understand.
You have 100-year-old.
Yeah, that's how it works. They are like, is there something older than me?
That's so terrible. Yeah, every religion deserves a stereotype.
Yeah, we just don't go in if we see our friends in the
Hey,
in the liquor
folks,
store.
I just want to put in a good word for my friend Tripp here. You can support Homebrewed Christianity's wonderful Lenten program this year. He
I should have
is
mentioned that.
talking every week to the legendary John Dominic Crossan, who I might have a big birthday next month, but 2 days before my big birthday, Dom Crossan is turning 90.
Oh yeah.
And when I mentioned to him our birthdays were in the same week and I was a little worried, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm having this big birthday. He just laughed at me and called me a little kid. Oh, you have so much time, It's like, you're only getting started at 65. So Dom is still with us at 90, and he's going to talk about the evolutionary Jesus, taking his work from the historical Jesus and the scholarship he's done over a beautiful, amazing, intelligent, and passionate lifetime of Jesus scholarship. And he's now thinking about it in terms of the evolutionary future of humanity and this gorgeous planet that God has given us. So Tripp is going to have him on for all of Lent, and a couple of us will come along as special guests on particular days. I'll be there one day. Brian McLaren will be there one day. Brian Zond, who you might not know, Pentecostal, he'll be there one day. And Jennifer Garcia Bashal will be there one day too. She's very cool, in case you don't know her.
The 4 lectures to use if you want to use it with a group are already recorded, edited, and on the group page. So last year people we're like, can we use it with a group if we don't meet at the same time? So we pre-recorded the lectures so you can use them in your group whenever you meet. And then each week there's like live streams with a different friend showing up, and it'd be fun. It'd be fun.
And Tripp is so amazing and generous is that you can actually do that for free if you take that option. But I urge you not to take the free option and instead give him at least whatever donation you can afford in order to keep the remarkable work going that he is doing to offer hope and to create a library of a better kind of theology for the future, that's available online. And it's what he's done is something that people talk about all the time, but he's actually pulled it together. And avail yourself to the resources that he's provided. So with that, I got to go.
All righty. Thank you, Diana.
It's always